What's going on, FUD Nation? Today we have a very special episode with DaVinciJ15. That's right, the one and only Bitcoin Oracle has been making predictions about Bitcoin and promoting cryptocurrency since 2011. Where were you in 2011 and what did you know about cryptocurrency? I know for one that I was completely oblivious at that time. I had not even learned about Bitcoin. So it's always amazing to see people who have really been in the space for so long and have that history. Whether or not he is Satoshi, as so many people have wondered, I think he has tried to disavow that rumor, but then again, that's such a Satoshi thing to do. Before we jump into this chat, I want to take a brief trip through history so you can get some sense of a background about DaVinciJ15 and why I'm talking to him today. In 2011, he posted the What is Bitcoin video to his own YouTube channel. He was running a silver and gold channel where he was talking about alternative currencies. Then in 2011, he started talking directly to the camera about the power of Bitcoin and how it's so important to be owning a bit. He's always been very caged in the way he offers advice within the space, never really some, outlandish moon boy stuff. He's always saying, make sure you only invest what you can afford to lose, stuff you can see disappear. I really like how responsible he is in the way he delivers content. He's always very measured, and I think that that's a very important and oftentimes lacking trait in the cryptocurrency world. That's so, enthusiastic, to use a word. So besides starting talking about Bitcoin in 2011, DaVinci actually begged people in a video to take their Bitcoin off of the now infamous Mt. Gox 6 months before the exchange was hacked. That's 6 months of lead time if you were listening to DaVinciJ15 that you would have had to save yourself from one of the most crippling and disastrous events in cryptocurrency history. But that's not all. DaVinciJ15 took back to the scene, started to really re-energize his cryptocurrency content. Of course, recently crypto Reddit and crypto YouTube have swept up, becoming completely enamored with this character. I'm so excited to have him on the show. He's a very, very educated and wise participant in the cryptocurrency space, and I think his perspective is of value. So let's give him a very warm FUD TV, FUD Nation welcome. So without further ado, welcome to the show, DaVinciJ15. All right, welcome to FUD TV, DaVinciJ15. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show, and welcome. How are you doing?
All right, not too bad. Thanks for having me on.
So as many might know, DaVinci has actually been in the space for quite some time and has made some actually pretty epic predictions. Starting all the way back in 2009, I believe is when your first video on your YouTube about cryptocurrency is. Not many of us can say that we've been actively promoting cryptocurrency as a movement since 2009, which was, I don't even know if Bitcoin was properly trading at that point in time. It was, how many exchanges were even in existence at that moment when you made your first Bitcoin video?
Well, actually, it was 2011, March of 2011. There was only actually one exchange. And it was MT Gox. And I was really nervous about sending money to Japan to some guy that I didn't know. And so I was mostly asking people in the local community if they had Bitcoins. And I was able to get quite a few people with Bitcoins, and they were selling it to me. So it wasn't so bad to just go in my local Toronto area. At the time, I was living in Toronto.
So I appreciate that history. Also, I wanted to ask you, one of my favorite things that you said, probably my favorite thing that you did, was when you actually tried to warn people and tell them to get their money off of Mt. Gox. And that was a very interesting time. So if you go back, we'll link it in the description below. Probably do a little video intro here so people can have that context and sort of get a few of these introductory videos if they're not familiar with you. But what made you so, convinced in 2000, I believe it was 11 still, or was it 13 when you made the video that asking people to remove their Bitcoins from Mt. Gox? This was at least 6 months before the big hack of Mt. Gox.
Yes, this was in August of 2013 when basically I saw that they had lost a lot of money through different means of exchanges, places that they were funneling the money through. The governments have seized the money. They'd lost 3 million here, 2 million there, and on top of that, their platform was had a lot of bugs. They were subjected to attack by the malleability of Bitcoin. Bitcoin transactions, basically, what that is basically your transactions. If you send one, the transaction ID can be changed, but not the transaction itself. And because of that, what the people were doing to Mt. Gox was what they were saying, hey, you know what? I didn't receive the money. Well, meanwhile, all they did was change the transaction ID, and their software didn't pick up the fact that there was a change in the transaction ID, but the person did get the money. And so they would send the money again, and that's how they would lose a lot of money that way as well. So it was clear to me that they were going to go down shortly, because they couldn't suffer so much losses and cover them all without, without saying, hey, listen, we lost a lot of money. Somebody's got to take a hit. Just like most of the bigger exchanges like Bitfinex, when they lost money, everybody took a hit.
And do you think that this sort of uniquely falls on the shoulder of Mark Karpel's, or do you think that this is actually also partly the responsibility of Jed McCaleb, who actually built the exchange, sold it to Mark Karpel's, who actually was the captain of the ship as it sank, if you as it were? Do you think that the responsibility? I've seen stories about Jed trying to raise awareness, trying to get Mark to sort of be aware of these security issues, and saying if he wasn't going to fix them, he wanted to give back his equity, and Jed didn't want to be a part of it. But is it also Jed's responsibility? Where does the buck sort of stop there? Who do you believe, is responsible for that kind of security issue?
Well, I think the person who's running the ship, right? I mean, Jed mentioned it, and it's up to the person who's running the company to make the changes, and he didn't do that, and it was partly negligent. I think he actually stole some of the money as well too.
Yeah. So do you think that this was actually as much of a hack as it was potentially maybe even an exit of sorts?
Yeah, I'd have no evidence.
Yeah.
One way or another. I just believe personally, as my opinion, that he probably took some money.
All right. Well, I appreciate that little walk through memory lane. Not the happiest of memory lanes, but a little stroll nonetheless. So let's fast forward a bit to the present day. You were, sort of every now and then, very, very seldom putting up videos, and then you put up a video about a month or so ago that really lit the internal Bitcoin and crypto community on fire here on Reddit, and it just absolutely kind of took over, and you've kind of skyrocketed to prominence within the community. Sort of people have taken notice of, I guess, your consistent, predictions, if you will. Everybody loves a good prediction. And so now we're sort of in the present day here, where, we've seen the rise and sort of the fall of altcoin mania, ICO mania, and here we are sort of sitting between what we hope are the two big bull runs, or the hope is that the next one's even bigger, right? And so, we find ourselves in a potential, extended bear market here. So here we are. I guess, what are the things that is in your mind is the most important changes that we're making to the industry as we're exiting this ICO mania, this crypto mania, where really, I think for the first time, Bitcoin and crypto was on the global stage, and we're hopefully going and approaching the next era where we're gonna again take the global stage, but this time hopefully in a more lasting way. What do you think are the most important changes that we're making? And then obviously I meant to do this earlier, but we can talk a little bit about your background as an engineer as well, and yeah, you can take it from there.
Well, what's the most important changes? Well, you know what, you mentioned that we wouldn't be that the ICOs are gone. They're only temporarily gone. Wait until the next round when we get closer to Bitcoin, this new all-time highs again. We're going to see new rounds of ICOs coming out and so forth. As for what improvements we've made, well, the space is constantly improving. You can see it with Mimblewimble, for example, and now we're going to have Schnorr signatures, and there's a lot of different types of cryptographic methodologies that have been invented thanks to Bitcoin. So this space is always moving forward, always advancing, and as long as people understand the difference between an open, secure public blockchain and a and a private and fully controlled centralized blockchain. And both chains should exist in our ecosystem. We just people need to be educated on the differences and what are your risks with a centralized exchange. I mean, a centralized cryptocurrency. So basically, so there are risks that, they're promises of men, and you know how promises of men are. They, if they get backed in a corner, they will break their promise. I mean, the United States has went bankrupt. The United States government has gone bankrupt twice. Oh, I know some people can't. What? When? What? They got bankrupt. Well, in 1933, they asked everybody to give back their gold, and they were promising gold before.
Wasn't really asking, was it?
No, they didn't ask.
They didn't ask.
No. And then they changed the price of gold. That's called a default, and you're basically renegotiating your debt.
Yep.
That way. And then the second time was in 1971 when Nixon took them off the gold standard, right? They promised to pay gold, and then they just defaulted. They defaulted on that promise. So
yeah.
You can see when any large entity gets backed in a corner, they will break their promise. And they won't make it look like that, but that's what it is.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I want to touch on another point you make before returning, of course, to Mimblewimble, because I think it's hyper relevant on today, January, mid-January, as we've just seen the sort of genesis block for the Grin coin. But before we get there, I want to talk a little bit about what you said about how ICOs and token sales or new digital assets are just simply not even, they certainly haven't died. They're taking a little bit of a hiatus as far as the mania phase. But I mean, this is just a sensible, like digital assets are ever growing in what they can represent and what they can do. And it's simply a new tool that mankind has invented to store data, information, value, all these different things. And, this is something I like to talk about on my channel a lot. The ICOs are dead, or that kind of concept that token sales are dead, is just an expression, because really we came out of a mania phase, and we're having a correction back to normality, where people are now creating tokens in a normal world instead of in this sort of hyperinflated, not very real environment. But this is this is like saying that because the .com bubble burst back in 2001, websites are dead. Of course, we didn't even have a Facebook by that time. We didn't even have many of the most prominent websites that exist today at that time. So, just like websites even today are not dead, it's quite hard to create another Google, but websites are by no means dead. There's new ones being created for specific purposes all the time, and same will be the case for tokens. And so I appreciate you saying that. And it's just about the utility of that token and the purpose and how it's being used, so on and so forth. Moving back over again, I want to touch on what you said about cryptography advances. I think that's really important, is to understand that there are different narratives here in the space. There's cryptocurrency as its own narrative, right? Like, what are we going to use as a currency? What is going to be a store of value, a medium of exchange rather? That's a storyline. There's also the storyline of decentralized web and digital assets and collectibles and all these other things that are being done, and they're people compare them, but they're kind of apples and oranges, right? They're just totally different things. And I think it's important to sort of understand that this one storyline of Bitcoin as a currency that is kind of a direct competitor to a dollar or gold or these other types of assets, that's something that needs to be paid attention to, and these cryptography advances make it a more realistic opportunity that we could achieve this as a global reserve currency. And so I think this is a good time to talk about Mimblewimble, and I know that you're very excited about it, so I want to sort of turn over the mic to you now, and let's talk about this very exciting. So I guess it's not brand new, right? Mimblewimble's been on the scene for a while, but Grin coin has certainly taken the internet by storm, and I know you've talked about it a few other times, so I want to make sure that my audience gets a chance to hear from you about Grin coin. So let us know a little bit about Mimblewimble and Grin coin and what makes you so excited about it.
Well, I really like the technology behind Mimblewimble. It allows for privacy first, right? Where we can have a cryptocurrency that's that allows for you to send your cryptocurrencies to another person without anybody else knowing who you sent it to and how much was sent there. It uses a very complicated cryptographic methodology, technology. Very few people on this planet can understand the white paper that was dumped on in the Bitcoin MRC chat room.
Yeah.
And it was just some mysterious guy just came along, dumped the paper, and took off, and nobody's seen him again. It was probably Satoshi.
Satoshi rises again.
Exactly. And I mean, it's been a long time before somebody could actually come up with an actual software product. I think we needed a software product. Even though it's compatible with Bitcoin, Bitcoin can use the protocol, use the cryptographic technology behind that, but it's very dangerous because we need to see how it works in the real world. So by having it running on Grin coin and Beam, this is a great thing, right? We get to see what the problems are, what works, what doesn't, how people react to it. And everything, because it's not just the bugs of the software. It's how do people feel when they see when you go looking at the blockchain and you can't find your transaction. How do you feel about that? Right? Because
it's definitely an interesting thing because that layer of verification, that layer of transparency, while it is that layer of public discoverability, and I think the more people understand about Bitcoin, the more they realize, well, I don't want all my purchases being publicly visible. I don't want all my transactions being publicly visible. It's also that layer of, well, I can always check my transaction. I can always double confirm, because let's be honest, even for the more techie amongst us, I'm sure you've had the experience of sending a crypto transaction and then going, wait, did I send that right? Double checking, triple checking, quadruple checking. Even if you're really techie, it can be uncomfortable, that feeling, and having that double layer of confirmation can make you feel a lot better. So I think what you're saying is very important.
Yeah, going to a block explorer and checking your transaction that it did get sent is very useful, in the sense that if a customer says, hey, I sent you the money, and you're like, I didn't get it. Okay, how do you see if he sent it or not?
It's in the mail.
That's one of the things that we're going to see when Mimble is being used full time. We're going to see, hey, wait a minute, this sucks. I can't find my transaction. They promised to send me something. They said they sent it, but I can't see in a block explorer if it's been sent and it's my software or it's something else, right? Yeah. So let's see how that plays out in the future. It's all up to the individuals who look at the software and use the software and decide, hey, I like this or I don't like it.
Do you think Mimblewimble is potentially the most important privacy technology in the cryptocurrency space? And do you also think that privacy technology is the future of the cryptocurrency space?
I think it's an interesting technology. I don't think it's the absolute best, because the absolute best, the market will decide on that one.
Okay.
And I like it. It's just, it may not be the absolute best. So I think maybe Schnorr signatures might be enough to once implemented in Bitcoin to basically covers up three multi-signature transactions, and makes it look like just one transaction. Meanwhile, it's one single transaction from one person signing it. Meanwhile, it's multiple people signing it, and so that's an interesting way of you could use that method, that particular feature to hide your transaction as well, but also allowing people to see that, hey, you know what, you did send the money.
Yeah, thank you very much for that recap of Schnorr signatures. For those of you who might not be so intimately acquainted with that technical term. And then so I guess returning back to that question of, do you think privacy is something that is going to be highly valued in the crypto space? Because I think that there's an interesting argument that the general public has more or less relinquished their desire for prior or turned it over and said, you know what, we care about customer experience, we care about user experience, privacy. You know what, we'll just go ahead and sign that huge user agreement without reading it. Who cares? You know.
Yeah, people don't care generally about privacy.
Yeah.
It's a secondary thing. It would be just like, yeah, I'd like that, but you know, you want the convenience of using a cryptocurrency across the internet faster, and then having privacy. It's just another feature that somebody would like to have, but don't really care, right? Because
it's a nice to
a
have.
lot of people. Yeah, a lot of people just feel that it's a nice to have and not an absolute. But I think it should be an absolute, especially with our governments being so tyrannical.
Yeah. And of course, we have that to look forward to. We haven't really seen what it looks like to have, everything so trackable, so traceable. It seems like blockchain-based identification is coming, where you can essentially, as much as you can identify people with, certainty, you can identify people with certainty and track everything they're doing. And so it becomes these other layers of, we're becoming more trackable, than ever before. And what are the governments, how are they going to react to that? Is that going to be a lot more totalitarian than we've seen in the past? Sort of feels like it most certainly could be. So certainly things to consider. And at that point, privacy might become extremely, extremely highly valued. Time will tell. Maybe this will be one of those, we'll look back at this Web 1.0, 2.0 as those crazy people that had no privacy, and we'll be those pioneers that sacrifice their privacy, and future generations will take it back, as it were. So that'll be interesting. So I guess let's talk about Grin Coin and your outlook on Grin Coin, and what you think, what you're excited for, what you're expecting for this coin to do, or where you think it's going to sit in the community.
Well, yesterday, Grin Coin was available to be mined for the first time, and I don't want anybody running out and buying it. I don't want anybody planning to mine it, and they're not professional miners. If you want to learn how to mine and want to try mining and just try your luck, and you already have some equipment, go right ahead, but don't go running out and buying equipment to mine this thing, because you don't know how it's going to turn out. Really, I like the coin's using. I like the fact that the coin uses Mimblewimble, but I do not like the what's it called, the built-in inflation into it.
Mm-hmm.
I prefer a currency for the average person who wants to save money and doesn't want to invest, so that they'll lose it in their investments. They should be able to hold a particular money and not have it lose value over time, is my opinion. Because you know what, when some people are earning like $2 a day and they're trying to save, it's really difficult for them to save if that money is losing value rapidly.
Yep.
If that money is gaining value rapidly, it's a lot better, because then they can move themselves out of poverty. Mm-hmm. And that's why I prefer a fixed amount in any particular cryptocurrency. Now, it's not saying that it's not possible for us to use Grin Coin the way it is. It's just for businesses and people who understand inflation, they can work around it and take advantage of it, whilst others, most likely the poor and middle class, they will not understand what's going on with that inflation. So that's my only concern about it.
Well, I think it's interesting. Inflation is an interesting concept, because there is the concept of coin death, where over time coins will fall out of circulation, right? People die, people lose USBs, XYZ. There's reasons why coins are no longer actively in circulation. And so there's the concept of, is zero inflation actually a bit naive? Does it actually essentially lead to a dead coin because there's just so few holders and transactors upon the network? There's that argument. I've seen also Stellar Lumens has an inflation policy where they actually distribute that inflation to current token holders. So it's kind of like, if you're holding it, yes, there's inflation, but you're participating in the inflation. So in theory, you're not losing value. And that's an interesting policy that I think, sort of blends the concept of fighting that coin death, as well as without having the damage to token holders, like you're saying. So I think that's an interesting thing to pay attention to. Inflation, Grin coin. I'm assuming, I have not read the white paper, but I'm assuming that inflation goes to miners and not to token holders. Is why.
Exactly.
So that doesn't actually protect you as a token holder, correct? So
Yeah, and the inflation is very large for the first 50 years. Then it goes down to 2% after 50 years, and falls lower if what I'm reading is correct. And I believe they just keep the same block reward forever.
So if Grin coin, due to the inflation, especially if it's more than 2% annualized, that's more than even our US dollar. So that's not very advantageous to token holders. What excites you, I think, in the space right now? Looking forward, having the gift of the perspective of seeing these first, second, third. I don't know what generation of cryptocurrency we're on now, but something after number 2, I think, is probably true. What do you think are the things that are most exciting to you about what's being developed, the new projects, old projects, existing projects? Where are you, I guess, most focused as far as what's happening right now in cryptocurrency?
Well, I'd like to get into. I'm really excited about it, decentralized exchanges, even though it would put my Pandora's wallet out of business because it's designed to actually take your money out of exchanges. I don't mind that because that I'm building this software for me first, and then for everybody else. I want to be able to take my money off of exchanges because, like, really, just recently I may have lost like 2% of my money at Cryptopia because they closed their doors just recently, and we don't know what's going on. Right? So far, I haven't heard any other news about when they're going to be opening the doors, how badly the damage is, and so forth. So that's the reason why I'm building this wallet, so that I won't have to deal with these problems where because I'll be just making my trades on that exchange and getting my cryptocurrencies out. Done, finished.
What about making Pandora's wallet compatible with decentralized exchange? Does that solve?
Yes, it does, but then there's no real point of using it except because the reason why is it's decentralized. There's no person to steal your cryptocurrencies on the decentralized exchange, right?
Yeah, of
So
course.
no one can stop you from exchanging, and no one can steal your money on the exchange, on a decentralized exchange. So
So let's talk a little bit.
that's
Let's talk a little bit about Pandora's wallet, just so that my audience can get to know what project you're working on, and of course, can use the product if it so benefits their crypto lives.
Yes. Well, everybody wants some sort of crypto, and I notice that most people are just looking for some sort of big winner cryptocurrency in order to make them rich in the future, and that's a dangerous play. I suggest people to use the little old lady strategy. It's safe, it's easy, and it allows you to get involved in many different cryptocurrencies because you don't know who's going to be the real winner. So if you're in everything, you're going to probably pick the winner when you've got like hundreds and hundreds of different cryptos.
So
And that's
is
what
the
I
little
have.
old lady strategy buying little bits of everything? Is that what's going on?
Exactly. And because you're spread out widely enough, you don't get hurt when one cryptocurrency goes to zero.
Have you been invested in any that have gone to zero? What's your, if you don't mind sharing, what's your worst investment in cryptocurrency history, if you don't mind?
I Let's see, worst investment. Interesting. I mean, before I learned how to trade, I lost 100 bitcoins. That was pretty bad in a bad trade,
Ouch.
leverage trade. But as for the altcoins, the worst probably was Steam when it was. I did the Fibonacci, and I think I put a little bit too much into Steam because I was like so excited about it, and
When was
that's
this?
why I tried back at 2 years ago, I think. The Steam was doing so well, and it looked like it was something that was going to be the future. Because I don't like Facebook, I don't like YouTube, and with them cutting people off, and preventing people from like having different opinions, and then having them like getting tossed off of Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. That's just ridiculous. Yeah, I didn't agree with those people, but that's not by cutting people off like that. You might as well say, okay, well, yeah, hey, government, anybody you don't like, right? That's not saying what you want them to say. I'll cut them off, because eventually that's what's going to happen, right? Even if the government had nothing to do with it, the government's going to watch and go, oh, okay, well, if you could do that, I could do that too.
Yep.
Right?
It's tough. I definitely feel for Steam. I'm currently building a social media app. I've run a couple big social communities online. I was running a low latency multi-platform live streaming app over the last few years, and it's definitely a balance of community management, and you want everyone to have a good time and not to feel targeted or whatever, and not to have your platform be a megaphone for messages that might be seen as harmful or destructive. So I definitely I understand what you're saying, and it is an interesting moral line, I guess, ethical conundrum that you have to walk through as you create these platforms, right? Which are not about, it becomes quite a public forum, and then you start getting into larger ethical debates as to what should or shouldn't be allowed. And of course, in that debate, I feel like you're always going to be to a certain degree wrong, and so it's tough unless you do open it up to complete 100% censorship resistant, and of course that is going to happen. The question is, are people going to opt for that environment? Are they going to opt for a slightly, it's an interesting debate for sure. But I agree with you. I think Steam was extremely promising, and if anything, just showed the potential for DPoS, as well as the potential for decentralized social media. Obviously, it's become a bit defunct now. I've been a big proponent of the Steam blockchain just because of the amount of transactions they process and the amount of activity that they process. But I agree with you that it's not looking like quite the future the way it was, and that we're looking for sort of second and third movers now. So I guess on that point, I want to follow up. You put out a guide recently about how to invest, or not how to invest in altcoins. That was the wrong way to say it. But you put out an altcoin rating scale. Can you talk a little bit? Can you talk a little bit about how you came to develop this scale, and how you've deployed it, and through this lens, what the best coins on the market right now are as far as the altcoin market when analyzed through your fundamental analysis scale?
Well, this document I wrote quite some time ago, and I just updated it recently, and I will be updating it some more in the future. It's basically allows you to do some fundamental analysis, and fundamental analysis is basically, okay, how good is this coin really, and is it going to have a future, or have a possible future, is what you're trying to look for. I don't really have a specific coin other than Dash, Ethereum, EOS, Tron, and so forth. Those coins are pretty Cardano as well, are very strong using my fundamental analysis. Right, it's just that the reason why I try to avoid a fundamental analysis is because we're all emotional creatures, and we tend to fall in love with a particular asset. And what happens is you end up breaking your rules in trading, and you end up making the mistake of putting too much money in one asset so easily, because you're like, oh, look, it's a fundamental analysis. It's going to the moon. Yeah, well, that might
all the
be
way
true,
up,
but not
straight to the moon.
Not today. That's a problem.
No stops between here and the moon. Yeah, it's so hard because I think one of the other things that's tough about fundamental analysis in this space is, where are you getting your information? In the end, most people, myself included, we have to get the information from the companies themselves. And so you're essentially reading the company line. You're taking the company line as facts. You're not getting sort of independent confirmations. it's just the nature of it being such a young space, and there being so little information out there. And one of the projects I think is a great example of this is VeChain, which I think is a phenomenal project. But in the end, all we really know about what they're doing is coming from them, and they have an amazing set of partnerships, but we don't know exactly what that translates to, even though they're working with multi-billion-dollar decacorn companies, working with supply chain on a macro level. It's hard to actually equate all this to, what does that mean for token demand? And how does that token demand affect the tokens you bought? So I think it's all just interesting things to consider. And, fundamental analysis, just like you said, is you need to do it. And then at the same time, you can't rely on it. So it's a catch-22, if you will, but very useful stuff. And it's interesting that you mentioned the coins you mentioned, which I think are very much so coins that people have become quite fond of. I would want to know, could you elaborate a little bit on Dash and why you really are fond of Dash, why you think Dash has a good future here?
Well, Dash has a privacy option, and also the governance of Dash, I think, is very well organized. I think they are pushing, they're advertising their product. They are basically marketing their product very, very well. They're getting it out there. For example, I read about them teaching people in Venezuela how to use the Dash. I mean, this is how it gets done, right? This is how you get people involved in cryptocurrencies, is that you have to spend money on getting people involved, because without that, right, you only have evangelists like Andreas Antonopoulos and myself, and that's not enough. We need people that are dedicated to push it, to marketing the product and coming up with solutions for cryptocurrencies. And that's where Dash comes in, and they're spending money in that direction, and that's why I think they have a good shot of success. It's not absolute, but they have a good shot.
So do you think that on that note, that Bitcoin, which there have been proposals to allocate more money to having sort of marketing expenses for Bitcoin, as far as miner fees and other different ways that Bitcoin can allocate funds, do you think that that's a wise proposal to have sort of a team that's actually marketing Bitcoin? Do you think that would result in more adoption?
I think so. I think they don't have to do the same thing that Dash does, and with the master nodes, or sorry, not master nodes, but the percentage going of the mining fees going to the development team. What they can do, the development team of Bitcoin can do, is reach out to all the major names in the space and ask them to do a sort of like a show or a conference where the proceeds and the donations go towards the development of Bitcoin and the marketing process of Bitcoin. And I'm sure a lot of us out there would be happy to help the core development team in that regards.
Of course. Yeah, it's kind of interesting how the biggest marketing engine are evangelists, people who have created businesses in the space. It's extraordinarily organic. One of the most grassroots movements, probably looking back, one of the most grassroots movements in the history of the internet or the world is Bitcoin. And to that effect, I think that, looking back the last probably 18 months to 24 months, we can see a tremendous amount of difficulty in coping with forks off the Bitcoin network, or, soft or hard forks off the Bitcoin network. Something I feel extremely passionate about that I know has been discussed or whatever, something about, I was talking about with a few other, essentially, enthusiasts in the space. What if CoinMarketCap, right, which is probably 90% of the way people check their cryptocurrencies, what if CoinMarketCap removed the name Bitcoin from every other Bitcoin fork except for Bitcoin? And so Bitcoin Cash was just BCH and Bitcoin SV was BSV or whatever. Would that alone have a tremendous impact on preserving this sanctity that is Bitcoin? And would you support that movement?
If they did it as a company decision, I support the right to make a decision like that on their own. It belongs to this sub, belongs to them, and they can do whatever they like. No one owns the name Bitcoin, and thus I don't mind other cryptocurrencies using the word Bitcoin. It's not a big deal. You're saying, yeah, it confuses the public. Well, the public is already confused. They don't try explaining a fork to them, okay?
It's how you eat your salad and pasta.
Exactly. And so it's not a big deal, right?
So you don't think forks have had a deteriorating effect on the market?
Not at all. Not at all. I think most people believe that, but where's the evidence, right? Do you think that, do you have evidence of like a group of people ready to come in and go, oh, Bitcoin fork? I don't get it. Forget it. Do you have that? Do you have that data? Nobody does.
Well, I guess it's a question of supply and demand, right? If the perceived supply is as big as all the forks put together, or if the perceived supply of Bitcoin is 21 million. And it's sort of, that to me is where, in the end, we're working with supply and demand curves. So if you're talking about newbies to the space, which let's go ahead and assume that 99.9% of the world are new to the space or uneducated to the point where they can't tell you the difference between Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin Core, or Bitcoin as I like to call it, does that affect, because to me the big problem is that it affects the supply and demand curve when you talk about most people who don't know the difference between original Bitcoin and new Bitcoin. So that's sort of the way my perspective on it is, if you have people who don't see the difference, then essentially perception becomes reality, and the supply for Bitcoin becomes potentially unending, and it becomes essentially de facto inflation. But yeah, I mean, no, I like.
It doesn't become de facto inflation, because that's like saying, okay, well, I want precious metals, and because there's gold, silver, and platinum, palladium, that's inflation of all the metals. What?
But you can't create it.
That's inflating gold. That doesn't make any sense.
You can't just create a new precious metal, though.
Yes, true. That's true. But still, you're still saying that the fact that the person has an alternative means that alternative prevents them from buying the original Bitcoin, and that's inflation. That's not inflation. They want to buy something else. That's like saying, oh, we have more cell phones, and so that means we could create more cell phones. That means that people will go and buy some other cell phone, and that's inflation in cell phones. No, because we want to have people give people choice. Choice is good, right? They can have vanilla or chocolate, and with cell phones, like, there's a huge array of different options to choose from. We don't all have to have iPhones.
Gotcha. I appreciate that. Yeah, so I guess I was sort of restricting my comment just to the use of the name Bitcoin, but at the same time, I respect your opinion on that matter. So I guess we're in January of 2019. There's not really any signs that the bear market trend has dissipated, or the energy of the bear market trend has dissipated. What are you looking forward to? What do you think the next few months hold? And I know that you've made a few videos that it could be years until we sort of get another all-time high on Bitcoin. Is that how you're currently feeling towards the situation? And of course, if that is the situation, how are you investing? Obviously not financial advice to anybody, but how are you personally investing over the next few months to years in 2019?
Well, I'm continuing to do the little lady strategy, waiting for Bitcoin to drop below 3,000, and then I'm going to start nibbling at it and buying in, scaling into the Bitcoin price. I might be wrong on it dropping below 3,000, and I'm willing to accept that. And I hope that I am wrong, because that means we get a new bull run sooner than later. But if I am right, I think we're going to see lower prices in Bitcoin finally just bounce around the bottom. We're probably around anywhere between $2,000 and $3,000 possibly for quite some time, maybe a year or two. And before we start turning around and moving back up, and I'm going to be well positioned by the time we do turn around.
I like that strategy. Are you investing in anything outside of cryptocurrencies?
Yes, I am investing in gold and silver, of course. I've been talking about gold and silver on my YouTube channels from the very beginning. That was where I was really my YouTube videos were all about, just why you should be buying gold and silver over investing in the stock market.
Well, that's great. So precious metals, gold and silver specifically, check out, of course, DaVinci15's YouTube channel where he has been talking about silver, gold, and Bitcoin for the better part of a decade now. We really appreciate your contributions to the space. If there's any piece of advice that you could give to people currently existing in the space, whether they're new or old, what would it be? What do you think are the sort of guiding light, North Star things to be paying attention to over the next year?
Well, this space is growing and very fast, and technology is moving extremely fast. We're getting new features, new things every single day, and it's so easy for you to go, "Oh my god, I gotta get that, I gotta get that." Don't do that. Take your time, investigate, read, watch videos about it. The market's not going anywhere, right? You will get a chance to get in when the time is right. And that's what you should do, is wait for the time to be right before you get in. If you make an emotional decision, it's most likely going to be wrong.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you taking the time. Everybody make sure to check out Pandora's wallet. We'll go ahead and link that in the description of this video below. Thanks again to DaVinciJ15. Go ahead and follow him on YouTube at his channel, DaVinciJ15. I will also link that in the description below. He's been an absolutely wonderful proponent of our cryptocurrency movement for quite some time, and we appreciate having him here on FUD TV. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that chat. It was really lovely having DaVinciJ15 on the show. A big thank you to you, DaVinci. Let's everybody be wonderfully nice and hospitable to our guest, DaVinciJ15. Thank you so much again. Let me know what you guys thought about this conversation in the comment section below. If you liked the video, hit that like button. And of course, if you're not already subscribed to FUD TV, what are you doing? Hit that sub button. It's good for your health. I'm Elio Trades. You're watching FUD TV, and I will see you very soon on the next episode.